let's do this. I have been trying to record this video for the last 2 weeks. I have scrapped all the different times I've tried, and I want to be authentic. I want it to be real, but I also want what I'm trying to get across to come across clearly. And as I kept diving into this episode, I realized that there's just so much to dive into, and it's not all gonna fit into one episode like I've been trying to make it. And so I realized, okay, we're gonna do this once a month. We're gonna dive into it. And if you don't know already, if you haven't watched the intro, this is episode 2 of TMI with Tiffany. I'm Tiff. And we are gonna be jumping into not the end of the discussion, period. We're gonna be talking about the menstruation cycle. We're not gonna go into the nitty-gritty detail of the menstruation cycle, but today we're gonna share my story, my why, kind of the reason why I don't think anyone is surprised that this is my first big topic that we're gonna dive into on the podcast. It may be TMI for some people, but for me, my period and my menstruation cycle has always been something that I've shared. Even when there were times in my life that I didn't share anything personal, this is something that I, for some reason, didn't have a problem sharing. And I don't know if it was because it's such an outward example of like life and what you're dealing with, but I knew that I was nothing I should be ashamed of, even if I felt that way at the beginning. My story starts at a mere 10 years old. And if you think about any 10-year-old you know, I mean, I have nieces and nephews that are that old, and it still blows my mind. But I was 10 years old when I started my period. To stop and think about that, I was in 4th grade. I was in elementary school, okay? And I started way before lots of my friends. I had some friends that didn't start until they were 16 to 18 in high school. And here I was, a little 4th grader, and I remember the day that I started. I remember what it felt like. I remember, for some reason, the embarrassment and the shame that I felt. And as I have started to look into menstruation and women throughout their generations, I realized that I am not the only one who felt this way. Even though my mom was someone who was willing to talk about it with me, I don't know why I was scared to tell her. I remember thinking, like, what is wrong with me? You think blood, and so you think, oh my gosh, like, I'm hurting or I'm dying, something's wrong. And I just remember seeing it on my underwear and thinking, like, what's wrong? And I yelled at my sister to come into the bathroom, and I have 2 older sisters, and so they came in and they were like, you gotta talk to mom. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, like, let's do this. But I felt so scared. And the moment I talked to my mom about it, she was like, this is totally natural. This is what happens. And she had a sister that started earlier, and so I don't think she was surprised that it could happen so young. But she took me and taught me everything that she felt like I needed to know at the time. And I wish it would have been enough, but I don't blame my mom for that. I blame my curiosity. I wanted to know more, and I started out from the get-go with extremely heavy bleeding, extremely heavy cramping. I'm talking like overnighters. I'm bleeding through them or going through them like crazy. I tried tampons over and over and over again, but between the infections they gave me and the fact that they wouldn't hold enough, I would have to go through them like crazy. I was a big pad girl, and jumping forward to where we are now, I wish I would have had all the things that we have now. And so she gave me everything I needed, and I never was without. And that's something I'm so grateful for. But I still had so many questions. And as a 4th grader in elementary school, it's like, oh yeah, sure, I know that I have a period, but how does this affect my life? I would have never known the depths that it covered for the next however many years. I was 10 when I started. I'm 27 now. So what, 17 years later, and I'm still learning. When I think about that little girl, I feel really sad for her because she went through a lot. And I don't want anyone to ever go through that again. And I know that I can't control the world, but maybe my one story will affect someone, and it'll just bring this topic to attention. I think that is why there's been so much resistance, and I've felt such a weight to talk about this topic because it's not talked about enough. And I almost scrapped it, and I was like, no, let's just not do it. And I thought, this is literally what I started my podcast for. This is what TMI with Tiffany was started for, is to talk about these topics, even if it's hard for me or if I have to care about what other people think. And as I really kind of went through the motions this last week, I started seeing stories pop up in social media and in the news and other things that were talking about menstruation and women, and I just thought, oh my heck, like, we make up half the population of this world as women, and this is one of the most natural things in the world, and yet in 2023 this is something that's just barely beginning to erupt, and the iceberg of menstruation and periods is just barely like being shouted from the rooftops. And I believe that it's because people that had stories like I do that want to shout from the rooftops, hey, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to make this better for ourselves and better for our kids and for the next generation. And so that's why I'm sharing. That's why I'm taking on these TMI topics and diving into them. This one is near and dear to my heart. I didn't think that periods could be so traumatizing, but I reached out to a bunch of people, and I heard a lot of comments coming back about how they all experienced the same thing. It was embarrassing, traumatizing, how they didn't know how to handle it all, and some of them still don't. Some of them still don't know how to bring this up or how to take care of themselves in public or bring it up in conversation, and yet it is something that is so vital to our bodies every single month. And you either know a woman, you came from a woman, obviously, and all of it is affected by this, like part of our month, every month. And I didn't think I was still affected by it until I went to the store the other day and I saw a pair of khaki pants. If you don't know what khaki pants are, Gen Z, I mean, you do, but they are what you would call uniform pants, and they're tan and super attractive. And for some reason, my mom and I bought a lot of those that year. I don't know why, but they are burned and seared into my mind. And I don't know why. This memory haunts me to this day, and why I will never, ever buy a pair of khaki pants. But let me tell you why. When I was in the 4th grade, one of my first incidents of bleeding through my pants, I was wearing khaki pants. I was in a classroom with a male teacher, and I realized that I was bleeding. I knew enough to know that I was on my period. And I remember those ceramic chairs. They're like that metal ceramic chairs, and I sat up and there was blood on my chair. And I didn't know what to do, so I wiped it off and I ran to the front. And imagine being a 10-year-old and peeing your pants, right? So imagine being a 10-year-old and you have a giant blood stain on khaki pants. These are tan pants, like the color of this wall. And I'm running up to the front saying, please, like, I need to go to the bathroom right now. So the teacher let me go, and that was great. And I got to the bathroom, and I remember looking in the mirror, and I could see the stain, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, I need to call my mom, I need to do all these things. And so I needed to go get my backpack, and I needed to grab this stuff because my mom sent me to school with stuff. And I was like, do I go to my backpack? Where's my locker? Like, what am I supposed to do? And I ran back to the teacher and I said, I need to go get something out of my locker. And he said, you just went to the bathroom. Like, you need to go sit back down. You're not getting another hall pass type situation. And I was like, I don't know what to say. I'm a little girl. Like, what am I supposed to be like? Oh, hi, by the way, I'm bleeding. Like, I need to go to the bathroom. Like, no one thinks about that. I didn't think about that. And I'm a pretty bold child at the time when it comes to this conversation. But still, like, you're just like, no, I don't know what to say. And so I looked at him and I said, I need to go to the bathroom right now. I need to go get something out of my locker. I need to go right now. And he said, no, like, go sit back down. And I wish I would have just like turned around and showed him and been like, look, this is why I need to go. But it didn't happen. Anyways, I decided that I just needed to leave. So I walked out of the classroom. And as my teacher walked out, he said, don't feel the need to come back to classroom. You can just go straight to the office. And I thought, awesome. So now I'm going to go grab my stuff, go to the bathroom, and I'm sobbing because I'm walking to the office. I'm now in trouble for something that I can't control. And we got to the office, and the ladies in the office saw and just held me and helped me, and we called my mom, and my mom came and picked me up. And I wish that was the only time that ever happened. I can't tell you how many times I bled through my pants, whether it was elementary school, junior high, high school. I mean, heck, I played on the volleyball team. Like, those are very thin and short shorts. And even now, like, as a 27-year-old, I think there's been moments where I bled through. And I never want that feeling to overcome me and say, like, oh, like, I can't do this anymore. Because guess what? We still have to. And yes, I've never worn khaki pants since. One day maybe I'll overcome that. But I just remember being so traumatized that this is something that I literally can't control. And so over the years, I did my best to never wear light pants and to take care of myself the best I could at school or during sports or wherever I was. And my mom taught me the story of the red sweater, where you have a sweater in your locker and you cover yourself up, or if you see someone else, you say, hey, here's a sweater, you tie it, and you cover the spots, and you help other people be discreet about it, or yourself. And as I got into junior high and high school, I realized that I needed to track my periods better, try to understand them, and figure out better ways to control the situation. If I couldn't control that it wasn't going to happen or was going to happen, I could control it once it started and do my best to take care of it. And so I went to an OB at a really young age. I started asking questions. We actually ended up getting me on birth control because my periods and my cramps were so bad. My bleeding was so heavy. They were giving me meds to try and lessen the pain. They were trying to give me meds to lessen the bleeding. And I just kept continually being an anomaly to these doctors over and over again. And I went through birth control 3 different times, and it tended to make me feel crazy, but it didn't seem to help regulate and didn't lighten my load. And so I'd get on and off and on and off, and it sent my already hormonal teenage years through the ringer. And I can't imagine being around me. I didn't know almost how to control myself. And here's this outward expression of what's going on in my life, and I'm trying to do my best to like stay private and to not embarrass myself or anyone else around me. And mind you, most people, well, some people, they go from 1 to 5 days. I tended to go from like 7 to 14 days. It was not uncommon for me to be really irregular or for my periods to go really long lengths of time, and I'm bleeding for most of that and cramping for most of that. And there were days that it was completely debilitating. Did I still have to go to school? Did I still play sports? Did I still try and live life to the best of my ability? Yes. But did it affect a lot of those things also? Yes. I remember playing volleyball in high school, and like I said, those are really short shorts, and I'm a big pad girl. And I remember feeling so self-conscious about what that looked like. And there were days where I wish I didn't have to play. My legs go numb as one of my symptoms. And there have been days driving where I lose control of the feeling in my legs, and I've had some really scary situations happening. And I feel like there's such a negative connotation around periods and menstrual cycles. And even now, it's hard for women to talk about it. And I mean, when I think back to it, like starting from 10-year-olds to 20, let's just say that the last 10 years of that, I'm just figuring it out as I go. And I wish that the options that we have now, the conversations we're having now, is something I would have had then. One of the people that reached out to me was a teacher who is a junior high teacher. And in his classroom, he has a menstruation station right by the door. And it has everything you can think of: pads, liners, tampons. And at the beginning of the year, he draws attention to the fact that this is an open and natural conversation that they're going to have. And he really brings a sensitivity to it that I admire. And I think back to that little girl that got in trouble, and I think back to how horrifying. I remember not ever wanting to go back to school ever again. And if I would have had someone that said, here, what you're going through is normal, like, let's have an open conversation. And not just for the little girls, but the little boys too. Hey, this is a part of growing up. And even though I was 10 and some of my friends hadn't started, it was right around the time that you have the conversation. The maturation video is what, 5th grade? And I had already been on my period or having my period for a year before that. And I remember seeing their faces and being like, what is happening? And the responses I got from some people, they said the same thing. They're like, I didn't know about anything until the maturation video. And that was all I got. And man, does it make me curious what the maturation video looks like now. If anyone has access to that, can I Google that? I should have looked that up. I want to know what are we, I can't even remember what was on the maturation video, because in my brain I was like, I already am living this. So hello. But for all those kids that have never seen anything like it before, or are just learning about it, like, wow, it's quite a wake-up call. Am I saying you have to go into all the crazy blood, gore, and detail? No. Do I think that as we are learning about our private parts and the stages of life, that this is something that should be an open conversation even when kids are young? Yes. I mean, like I said, most people have siblings and sisters and moms. Like, this is a part of that life, right? And I know all you moms, I know there are times when your kids are going to the bathroom with you, and man, I can't imagine the conversation that stirs with some of this situation when you're on your period. But these conversations should be had, and I hope they're being had in your homes at an earlier age, because I was 10, but I know I've heard stories of people starting earlier than 10, and that just like blows my mind. And I want to just shout it from the rooftops, like, this is not TMI, this is not taboo, this is just as natural as childbirth and puberty and anything else that comes with the female body. And you're not alone in thinking that your stories are different than other people. I think we share more of the same stories than we think, more of the same feelings than we think. If you know me, you know that for my entire life, we call my menstrual cycle Maggie. I was about a teenager when I realized that people don't like talking about this, and someone mentioned that they called theirs the Maggie or Martha the menstrual monster or whatever. It was like their code in their family. And so for a long time, yeah, she was Maggie, my menstrual monster. And then as I got older, I realized she's not a monster, and neither am I. This is something that I can't control. And yes, it affects my hormones and my emotions and my cravings and everything else like crazy. This is something that I need to look at in a different light. And I don't want the excuse of like, oh, I'm on my period, I'm gonna be a monster. No, but I think understanding my hormones and my emotions and what part of my cycle I'm in and tracking it and trying to figure out my personal journey a little bit better reminds me that I'm not a monster at all when this happens. I'm just someone going through the hills and valleys of my menstrual cycle, just like you and anyone that you're around. And I realized that educating myself has been the biggest help, because I have tried everything. I have tried so many remedies to ease some of my pain and my bleeding, and I'm kind of in one of those situations at this point where I just let it go and just feel it out and take it each day as it comes, because I don't know about you, but my menstrual cycles are not the same. And they haven't been the same since I started. They've changed constantly over the years, and they are continually changing. And so I'm continually educating myself. And I don't reference my period as Maggie so much anymore. But at the time, it was the best way I could think of to have a conversation about my menstrual cycle and not gross people out and not freak people out, and allow me to talk freely about it and say, hey, my friend Maggie's here and she's being brutal. And I know that there is a big conversation right now happening about talking about your private parts and your anatomy in its correct terms. But at the time, as a young girl, I didn't know any better, and I just thought, this is great. I don't have to make this a bigger topic than it needs to be, but I can share with my friends and my family and be able to have them know exactly what we're talking about. And actually in high school, I had a group of guy friends that I was really close to, and they walked in on a conversation about me talking with my girlfriends about how Maggie was here for the week. And man, my friend Maggie, she drove me crazy, and she made me mad, and she was just the worst, and I just want to punch her in the face. And they were like so invested. They're like, what's the tea? Tell me the tea. Like, who's this girl you don't like? I mean, you're in high school, of course there's drama. And I'm like, you really don't want to have this conversation? And they're like, yes, we do. I want to know. And I'm like, no, you really don't. And my friends are just laughing. And so we went about the rest of the day. And by the end of the day, they had not stopped bugging me about who this Maggie person was. And for all you people named Maggie, I'm sorry. It was Eminem. So that's how it worked. But I laughed when they kept bugging me about it. And I was like, okay, you know what? You really want to know? And they're like, yeah, we want to know. So I took them on a little walk. And I said, Maggie is my menstrual cycle. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah. They're like, no. I'm like, yes, I promise you. My friend Maggie is here for a week. I'm on my period. I'm talking about my menstrual cycle. And they're like, but you said you hated her and that you wanted to punch her in the face. And I'm like, yes. Sometimes the pain is so bad, like I literally just want to scream and punch someone in the face. And she's mean, and it's painful, and it's hard, And that's the best way I can describe it. And I don't have to gross you out. And they're like, seriously? So you've just been talking about your menstrual cycle all day? I'm like, to people who understand it, yes, I have been. And so we sat and had a conversation, and we didn't go into crazy depth, but I helped them understand why I call it that and how we talk about it and how it affects me and how it affects our friends. And honestly, as I step back looking into it now, I'm like, how it affected them as high school boys. And I actually remember that one of the guys got married, and his wife knew me as the girl that had talked to her husband about menstrual cycles, and how he actually, the funny thing is, he brought it up to her and he was like, oh, are you on Maggie? Like thinking that every girl calls their menstrual cycle Maggie. And she's like, what? He's like, yeah, you know, like your time of the month. And I guess they sat and talked about it, and she's like, thank you for opening up this conversation to my husband. Now I don't have to. And I guess he handled it really well, and kudos to him. Honestly, that goes to his character. Just because I talk to him doesn't mean that people aren't immature about it or that they don't still have a hard time talking about it. But I'm grateful to see the paying it forward moment where it's like, okay, I had an open conversation, and now another woman is being treated with kindness and understanding and is maybe more comfortable talking about it. And I look at my brothers in the same situation. My little brother will tell you, he knows everything there is to know about periods and menstrual cycles and all that comes with it. He has lived through many horror stories with me, and he has gone to the store to get me all sorts of things. And I'm grateful that it's an open conversation in our home and that he's willing to do that for me. As I was going through all of this information, I had this little aha moment, and I realized that, like, why is it taboo for people to go to the store and get pads and tampons? Obviously, I know there's a million choices, but why is that an awkward thing for men? Why is this something that isn't the exact same as going to get diapers? Like, do you feel awkward going to the checkout stand with diapers and wipes? And yet we feel embarrassment and almost like an ick to get pads and tampons and Midol and, excuse me, honestly, you should be getting chocolate and flowers or whatever else you feel like your woman needs, or your daughter or your sister or your friend. Because just like you'd get bandages for a wound, you take care of this mess, of this situation. And I heard stories of men that were like, do you really need this? Like, do I really need to go get that? It's like, yes. Do you package and tend to a wound? This is something that is literally happening to me, and I need you to go get this. And so I'm grateful that I have had open conversations with the men in my life. It's not easy, and sometimes having the nickname made it a little bit easier, but I have been even in job situations where I thought I was going to lose my job because I didn't have the ability to show up. I did everything I can. I reached out. Almost every job I've been into, I've just said, hey, I'm a woman and my menstrual cycle each month is really hard to deal with, and I will do everything I can to be here, but just know, like, I want to give you a fair warning that I may or may not on a whim be able to show up, and I'm sorry for that, but it's something I can't control. And I've done that every job knowing that they may not hire me, and that's in and of itself is terrifying. And I showed up to work some days with a heating pad, and my boss would look at me and I said, I'm here, so just be grateful. And I know that that is a whole nother podcast episode to jump into women in the workforce and how mothers deal with it and how young adults deal with it and how teenagers in school deal with it and little girls in elementary deal with it. So we are going to jump into all the specifics and what products we use and what are good advocates to turn to and where good information comes from. lessons I've learned that I hope to share with you. Please know that if you don't know how to get out of bloodstain, reach out in the comments and I will definitely, maybe we'll go over that too. Go over laundry with bloodstains. Because man, all you people out there who are messing with women, just know we've been dealing with bloodstains our whole entire lives. We know how to get rid of them. Just kidding. But not really. And just knowing that like this is something that affects our daily life during that time of the month. And honestly, I didn't think I was so passionate about it. But everyone I talked to and mentioned that this was maybe going to be my first big topic, they weren't surprised at all. They were like, Tiffany, this is literally you, like, to a T. This is not TMI for you. And I have gone through some pretty TMI moments, I will tell you what. Like I said, my legs have gone numb before, many times. And I remember one of the most humbling moments of my life was when I had been in the shower and I was in a steaming hot shower, because all you girls out there, you know that the hotter the better when it comes to that time of the month. And I was just in like a sauna and just trying so hard to find any kind of relief. And I collapsed in the shower. And my family could tell that something was wrong, and I just yelled, I need help. And I remember my sisters and my mom coming to my aid and realizing they couldn't carry me, and so I had to have my dad help assist me out of the shower. And for a teenage girl, that is pretty traumatizing. But also to have that moment that like this is something that I couldn't do anything about. And I have had moments 10 years later that have still affected me and humbled me. And I think that's why I believe that this conversation needs to be out in the world. Women should not be ashamed or embarrassed for something that literally affects almost our entire lives. I have lived with mine longer than I've lived without it, and I am still learning and I'm still growing. Heck, I just am diving into the period underwear world. Oh my gosh, that would have been amazing as a younger child. And cups and discs, and I am diving into all the different phases and better ways to track and journal, so that I can have the best days on my menstrual cycle. Yes, the best days. Because I believe that even though this comes around once a month, that we can still have great days with our menstrual cycles. And at 27, I am eager to continue this conversation and to scream it from the rooftops. There may be a lot of things in my life that I didn't want to talk about, but this was one of them, and I know why. Because it is something that has affected me on so many levels. And I think it's just finally come full circle. And I hope that one day when I have kids, whether girls or boys, that this is an open conversation in our home, and that little girls and grown girls across the world are being heard and are feeling comfortable in their own skin, and understanding that even though this is something that doesn't change for us, it's something that we can conquer and something that we can live through, hopefully one day with a smile on our face. Hopefully we find options to make these hard times a little less painful or a little bit better. And I know that not everyone is as vocal about it as I am, and that not everyone's periods are as horrendous as mine are. And I guess even more so, we're all the same as women, but we are all so different. And I think the world is starting to see that this situation needs to be talked about more and addressed and helped and heard. And I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of bettering women and men, especially because I think a lot of times that even though I feel like we tend to isolate during this time, that we are surrounded by boyfriends and husbands and fathers and brothers and friends that want to care for us and maybe don't know how, or want to have this conversation for a better understanding, but we haven't started it, or need to have this conversation so that they can understand better, because this affects them just as much as it affects us. And I will do my best as we continue on in this podcast to bring in different opinions and different resources and different experiences so that you can understand that you are not alone in what you deal with and how you deal with it. I think there is an option for everybody, and that is what is so amazing about this modern world that we live in. And I think back, I talked to my mom a little bit, interviewing her about what hers was like, and I have realized what has changed through generations and what hasn't. And I think the more we talk about it, the more we share, and it doesn't have to be at the top of our lungs or inappropriately. It can be privately and sincerely. And if you want to get into the TMI nitty-gritties, I'm your girl. Reach out to me, and I am willing to share my stories, and I'm willing to hear yours. I want to be an advocate for you and for myself, because I believe that women deserve better. I believe the world deserves better. And this is just the beginning of this topic, which is why this is not the end of the discussion. This is the beginning. So thank you for joining me for episode 2, for my story. And I hope that you know that your voice makes a difference. And I will continue to show up and share out loud. And I hope you join me next time. And I hope you join me in this conversation every month, just like our cycles, because this is a topic that is not going to go unheard anymore. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.